Ow, I just punched the table. Hello everyone, my name is Lisa and I'm the Viet Vegan, because I'm Viet and I'm vegan. Today, I'm bringing you more Vietnamese recipes because today is another collab video. Woo! Mary is the culinary genius behind Mary's Test Kitchen. She does amazing, super delicious vegan recipes, lots of like vegan basics like how to make soy milk, how to make tofu, how to make things that you probably should make more often but you just buy because you're lazy. Well, Mary's got you covered, and she is very meticulous with her recipe testing. Do know that when you try her recipes, it's gonna be delicious. She's also Asian, so she does lots of Asian recipes for you to try, but she also does things like donuts and pumpkin spice muffins, and they're pretty rad. So definitely go check out her video. She is doing these amazing barbecue steamed buns, or char siu bao. I don't know how to pronounce it because I'm not Chinese, but barbecue pork buns, but they're vegan, of course. Go subscribe, go check out her video. Let's get to cooking. Today, I'm gonna be making a recipe that you might have seen that I teased in my What I Eat in a Week video. We're gonna make some lemongrass beef seitan. It is super delicious. It's gonna be great. The thing with seitan is that it takes a little bit of prep time. It is not a super lazy recipe. It makes a lot. It's pretty easy. It's just, it takes like a little bit of prep. It's a 2-day process. I mean, it's not absolutely necessary, but for best results, there's a 2-day or like a big wait time process. So we're gonna get started with the seitan. What that involves is some vital wheat gluten. This is just the protein of wheat, which is the part that most people who are celiac or gluten sensitive are intolerant to. So if you don't eat gluten, this is not the recipe for you. You can find this in health food stores. You can buy it online. I found it in the Bulk Barn. This is some onion powder, ground white pepper. I find that white pepper is a little bit like sweeter and softer in flavor profile, but it's still peppery, whereas black pepper is like something that like really takes over a recipe. These are the dry ingredients. You can also add garlic powder to this. I'm not going to because I'm gonna use a lot of it in the recipe later on, and I also ran out and I couldn't find it at the store that I was going to. They only had garlic salt. I'm gonna add to 1 cup of water some oil, tamari. If you want to keep this soy-free, you could also use coconut aminos or liquid aminos instead. And then mushroom broth powder. If you're new to this channel and you don't know what mushroom broth powder is, oh boy, am I gonna blow your mind. So basically mushroom broth powder is mushroom granules, and it's like a concentrated form of like mushroom seasoning, and it is hella good. And that's what I use for my broth, and a lot of times making any sort of savory dish a little bit tastier. You can find it in your Asian grocery store. You can find it on Amazon. I have a video where I did a grocery haul that shows you the packaging. I should probably do a video just on mushroom broth seasoning, so I stopped referring to this one really long video. But here we are. We have our wet ingredients, we have our dry ingredients, and we're just gonna mix them all together. And then you stir it, and eventually you have this like goopy, lumpy dough. So we have our gluten mass. It looks really weird and it's very soft and kind of spongy, and you're like, how is this gonna be beef? But just have faith. If you know anything about how bread works or how just gluten works in general, gluten is a protein, and much like you would need bread to make it chewier, you want to knead this mixture until it gets like a less spongy, more hard mass to it. You can have fun. You can like, it's something that you can get kids to do, and you can like karate chop it and punch it. Any sort of impact that you have on the gluten will create a chewier texture. So I like to do this for like maybe 5-10 minutes until it gets kind of like harder. Oh, you know what I forgot to add to this? Damn it, 1 second. One thing that you can add is some Marmite. This is like a yeast product. It has a very funky, deep umami flavor. I don't know how to describe it. So I'm gonna add it in a little late and hope that it will mix in. Ideally add this in with your liquids and then just blend it in that way. But it also just helps give like a beefy sort of flavor to your seitan, and also a little bit of color. So basically you want it to sort of like stretch and tear. You want to just kind of like roll it up into like one big lumpy mass. And then you have your wheat meat. Now you grab a cutting board, wheat meat, you want to cut it into some slabs. So basically when I cut this, I want to cut it into slices. It'll eventually form like steaky type strips, about less than 1 inch thick. And then you'll have like this sort of like weird slab of steak, pork chop sort of shape. I don't know. I don't eat meat anymore. I don't know how meat is cut, but it kind of looks like that. And that way when I slice it, I'm gonna slice it diagonally this way. All right, so I have a lined baking sheet. I'm just gonna pop these guys on. You can use parchment paper, you can use a Silpat like what I'm using, like a silicone mat. So I'm gonna put this in the oven, 350 for about half an hour until it's like nice and golden, and I'll be right back. So the next thing we're gonna prepare is lemongrass. Now you can buy lemongrass that's frozen and already processed at the grocery store, but I thought I would show you guys what lemongrass looks like. I've also shown it in this video, I think, when I made lemongrass tofu. Figured if you haven't already seen it, what's the hurt in showing you again? It smells so good. It's one of my favorite flavors in the world, and it's basically this kind of like woody, stocky sort of deliciousness. And you trim off like this woody outside bit because that's not gonna taste super great. You can keep it for like a stock, and actually for when you boil the seitan, like you can keep the stem and boil it in the stock. I just take the woody outer shell off, kind of like onions, and you just want the like kind of more tender part, because otherwise you're gonna have like really woody bits in your seitan. It's not gonna be as good. And I'm gonna do a big batch of it so that I have it on hand for the future. So this stocky bit, this dry woody bit, you can save for a stock, but I'm just gonna put those on the side because we don't wanna eat those. So I'm gonna trim off these ends because can't eat those. And what you're left with are these delicious intoxicating goodies. Oh my God, it smells so good. Okay, so to process it, you're gonna chop them quite finely, because when these are put in the food processor, it doesn't really chop it up any smaller. It just separates the individual like filaments. If you cut them this big, then you're gonna have these really long, like 1-inch strips. So basically you wanna cut them as thin as possible so that they're not a bitch to eat later, basically. I have chopped all the lemongrass up. I'm gonna put it in the food processor. It's gonna blitz into tiny little itty bitty shreds. I left it on for a little bit, maybe about like 2 minutes, 3 minutes straight. So this is the texture that we're looking for right here. Kind of shredded, but at the bottom, we have bigger chunks as well, which is also okay. Because it's relatively dry, there's not, I mean, there is some moisture to it. We basically don't want it to clump up. So when you put it in, don't pack it down. Just kind of put it in quite loosely so that it'll be easier for you to grab when you take it out of the freezer later on. And now you have lemongrass for like a year. Ugh, fresh lemongrass is so good. Hello, set change once again. I'm gonna turn on the heat here because the next part of the process is boiling the seitan. Now you might be thinking, Lisa, you already baked the seitan, now you gotta boil it too? I wasn't the one that created seitan. I'm not the expert. I'm just falling off of what I've heard from other people. So once you bake it, it establishes the texture and like the crust of the meat, I guess. And now what we do is we boil it to add some moisture and to develop the texture. I don't know, I'm not the expert here. I learned from the greats and I just modify it so it tastes Vietnamese. There is a broth that you use to make it taste like beef or chicken or pork or whatever. And this one, I have a special concoction of things that made it taste kind of beefy. I'll leave the full recipe and all the ingredients that I used for the broth below. Just a shout out, everything that I've learned about seitan, I learned mostly from this book. So this book is called Seitan and Beyond, Gluten and Soy-Based Meat Analogs for the Ethical Gourmet. It's by Chef Sky Michael Conroy. There are a bunch of different recipes in here with very, very specific instructions. I have modified a lot of the recipe. I based this off of the steak bites, but I subbed out a lot of the ingredients. But the general preparation method of like baking and then boiling was from him. So if you want to learn more in-depth info about how to cook seitan, just go to that book. You bring this to a pretty happy simmer. You leave it on simmer and you let the seitan cook for about 25 to 30 minutes. Because it's already baked for 25 minutes, typically you would like want to cook seitan for about an hour. I'm gonna put this on the stove over there. It's gonna cook. And once you're done cooking the seitan, put the cooked seitan in a plastic bag or a container or whatever and cover with about a 1/4 cup or 1/2 cup of the broth. And then you let it sit in the fridge overnight or like for 8 hours or whatever to develop the gluten texture. It's all about texture, right? So it really helps set up the texture and makes sure that it's not spongy. So because I prepared this ahead of time, I actually have some seitan that I did yesterday that is prepped for today. So I'm gonna turn off this heat and we're gonna do a little movie magic and just get along with the recipe. So here we have the seitan that I made yesterday. It is sitting in some broth. It's set up, it's really firm, so we're gonna pull it out and we're gonna start cooking with it, just to show you an example of what the texture looks like now. All right, so now we're gonna slice them into kind of steaky, strippy bits. And at this point, like, it's cooked, so you can try it. Oh. That tastes so good and so beefy. Oh, another ingredient that you can add that I forgot to do in the second batch that I did for this batch, you can add Worcestershire sauce. There's vegan Worcestershire sauce, is more of that funky, deep umami flavor. So we're gonna cut these up and then we're gonna cook them up with some lemongrass. This actually makes so much. What you can do is you can make this whole batch and then like only cook up half of it and then freeze the rest so that you have seitan on hand pretty much whenever you want. Now on to the last step where we are finally cooking. Well, I guess we were cooking before, but like, you know, just we're about to eat, okay? We have our seitan sliced, we have the lemongrass that we processed earlier, we have some shallots, which is like a mini red onion, but a little bit sweeter in flavor, and personally I find it more delicious and very common in Asian dishes. Over here, I also have some sliced cucumber. This is for the sandwiches. I used a mandolin slicer. If you want to know the one that I use, I will leave it linked down below because I've tried many different slicers that all suck except for this one. So we're gonna add a little bit of oil, and then you wanna add the onion, or the shallot. Oh, that's a good sizzle. I'm also going to add some garlic, which I have minced and frozen ahead of time. I use like an ice cream baller to separate stuff, or an ice cream cube tray thing. So I'm gonna use about 3 cloves of garlic. I'm also going to add the lemongrass in here. This is about, I'm gonna use maybe like 3 tablespoons, maybe a 1/4 cup worth. If you don't like using oil, you can use a little bit less of it. Fat generally absorbs flavor. That's how flavor generally works. It's carried by fat. So you need the fat in this recipe in order to carry the flavor, because there isn't that much fat in this. Whereas in like most other animal products, you know, steak and stuff like that, they have their own natural oils. That's why they're able to like hold flavor so well. When we make vegan alternatives, we need to make sure that we like help flavor get carried through as much as possible, you know? So we're gonna add the seitan. I'm actually pretty happy with the ratio of like flavorings to the seitan here, so I'm gonna set this aside. In my recipe down below, I'll increase the ratio of the shallots to lemongrass and garlic so that it is adequate, you know? I'm also going to add some soy sauce here. This is some Golden Mountain seasoning sauce. It is like a flavored soy sauce. So what you want on this is to get some color on the seitan to like season it. I'm gonna add a little bit of water, because I don't want it to dry out and I want it to cook a little bit longer. So one sec. Prepare yourself for a very loud sizzle. If you want it to be a little spicy, you can add some chili flakes before you add the water. But I'm just gonna add some black pepper, and I think I'm good with this. Yum. Ooh, meaty, delicious. Okay, I'm turning off the heat. Let's make our sandwiches. As many of you know, Vietnam was colonized by the French, which is why there's a lot of culinary sort of influences on Vietnamese culture. One of the things that Vietnamese people borrowed from French culture, I guess, is bread. Vietnamese cuisine doesn't use that much bread, but there's one thing that we do use a lot of bread for, which is banh mi, which is this like airy cloud of a baguette. The crust on the outside is very, very crisp, very light, and almost like papery when it crunches and it breaks like that. And inside you have a very fluffy, almost like airy texture. And like this is not a very heavy bread at all. Whereas like a baguette, like you would get full off of eating baguette, you know what I mean? If you're wondering where you get this kind of bread, I get this from the Asian market, and it's typically about like 4 for $1. It's very affordable. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna spread some butter on the inside. I'm using vegan basil, which is I guess vegan margarine. What I like to do is I like to make a cut for them, and then I put them in the oven for about, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes at 350, just to like get them kind of crispy and delicious. You do you. If you get them fresh, you don't really need to toast them. This is some pickled vegetables. It's pickled daikon and carrot. I have a recipe for my version of this down below. It's the recipe my mom gave me, so it's legit. So we're gonna add some of this. This just adds a little bit of contrast and texture and flavor and a bit of acidity to cut through the richness of the seitan. Now I'm going to add some cucumber. You can add a couple slices if you want. You can also kind of like layer them in a little bit nicer if you want to. You could do like rolls. Ooh, maybe I'll try that. Oh, that's so cute. Cool, and this means that we can add more vegetables to the roll. This is not traditional at all. Typically we just slice it. We're gonna add some mayo as well. I probably should have added that before I added the vegetables, but I forgot, so here we are. I'm just using some vegan Vegenaise. I think it's pronounced Vegenaise, but I call it Vegenaise. But I also have a recipe for one out of aquafaba that I use. I just happen to have this because I bought it for a friend and then they didn't want it. We're gonna add some lemongrass beef. Just stuff it like a sandwich. I don't know what to tell you. Ta-da! Let's taste test this. But this is the final sandwich. Pretty excited. Just a delicious form of food. Because I have the cucumber and the pickles, it adds a bit of freshness and extra vibrancy and flavor. But the seitan is so good, so flavorful, so meaty. That is really good. Lemongrass, anything, is one of my favorite foods. It reminds me of home. It's delicious, and it's just Vietnamese cuisine, man. It's the best food. You can also try making this recipe with tofu instead. I have a tofu lemongrass recipe. I can link it down below. You can put it in sandwiches, you can put it on rice, you can put it in spring rolls. It's the same sort of thing. You can use this filling on spring rolls, like in the fresh spring rolls as well. You can put it on rice. There's so many different things that you can do with it. You can put it on like rice noodles. Ugh, so good. I hope you give it a try. If you're not willing to go through the whole ordeal of seitan, like I said, using tofu is perfectly delicious. I use fried tofu for this. It is hella good. If you make this and take a picture, tag me on social, tag the Viet Vegan. That's me on pretty much every single platform. Go check out Mary's recipe if you haven't already, because that ish looks good. Thank you, Mary, for collabing with me. Your excitement for food makes me super excited for food. So if you guys haven't checked out Mary yet, please go do it. Subscribe. She's one of my favorite vegan YouTubers because she is just so funny and so talented when it comes to delicious food. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a delicious day. Bye.